You are listening to the Tenets on the Kyle Dempster Studios Network. To support us, visit patreon.com/Kyle Dempster Studios. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of The Tenets. My name is Kyle, and I'm joined here by my co-host, as always, Stark Realm. Hi, Stark. How you doing today?
Pretty good.
Good to hear. Now, we have had a weird couple weeks getting you guys episodes, mainly because we've been pre-recording so much. As you know, I guess now it's been 2 weeks ago, we did the Rich Lambert episode, which is amazing. You should go check that out. And the week before that, we had the Zynode episode, which was also amazing, and you should check that one out if you want to get some tips on upping your DPS and practicing mechanics. But in between the two, we kind of bookended it with the Elsewhere NDA. We started with part 1, and we just concluded the other day with part 2. We've also changed our recording schedule, so now we're recording on Wednesdays, but you guys are still going to get these episodes on Sundays. So we're going to test out this recording pattern for a while. It works better for our schedules, but we'll see how it works when it comes to news hitting things. It should be pretty good. You guys will still get, when things like patch notes come out on a Monday, you'll still get the information by the following Sunday like you normally would anyway. So it shouldn't have any real noticeable effect on the listener side. But if it does, we will accommodate that accordingly. So for this week's episode, because you had a backlog of things to listen to, we're finally going to touch on all the PTS notes here. And we're going to look at both patch 5.0, which came out on April 15th. That was when the PTS first launched. And then we're also, later in the episode, going to move on to patch 5.0.1, which is some additional changes to the PTS. Now, if you're someone interested in getting onto the PTS, you do need to be using this on a computer. It does not have any console side access, so you do need to be on PC for this, preferably. Do you know if there's Mac access for this? There should be, right?
There should be, yeah.
Okay.
Mac and Linux. So it's by server.
Okay.
And so PCNA and PCEU are both accessible to the Mac client. And I think there's a Linux client that'll run through Wine, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Any rate, if you're using either of those sets, you should have PTS access. There have been issues in the past with the Mac clients not being able to access the PTS or not having stability issues. I don't know if that's true with the current build. So that's stuff that usually gets dealt with before it hits live, as far as I know. But I honestly haven't gamed on a Mac since 2002, so I don't know.
And there's also been a little, I don't know if this was intentional or a glitch, but pardon me. I've heard that people that do not already have Elsewhere pre-ordered are having trouble rolling Necromancer. Some people are thinking it's intentional, others not. I've not bothered to get a firm answer on that one way or the other.
It's not, assuming this is like previous years, it's not intentional. It's this weird glitch that rolls through every year. Usually they get it sorted out in the first couple of days. This time, if it's gone longer, it's probably just been they've got other things on their plate.
Right. So there you go. And I've heard it actually does resolve if you pick yourself up a copy. So I that's all I can say. I didn't have the glitch, but I've already been pre-ordered. Reminder, though, if you are interested in getting Elsewhere, do try and pre-order it. You get that bonus horse by doing so. That will be gone once May 20th hits for you PC users. So get in on that action sooner than later. We also have that buying guide up on the website. So you can go to kyledempsterstudios.com, and under the FAQ, there's a helpful buyer's guide. If you buy through there, it helps Pitbull rescues. So just a shout out, and it gives a little back to the channel here. So just a quick shout out on that one. Now, Stark, are you ready to jump into what we can hopefully make fun PTS changes?
Oh, we can certainly run through stuff.
Well, the top of the list here is the Templar, which is my thing. So, interesting one. Now, we're just picking out things that we should add that are very kind of extreme changes. They're things that are really gonna probably already have hit your plate by this point, but if not, these are things you're gonna want to pay attention to. Breath of Life can no longer bounce out of its cone, and by that we mean previously Breath of Life could target in any direction and hit 2 people if you went with that morph, but now it looks like both of them have to be in line of sight of your character. So
yes, this is actually following up to a change from 2 years ago with Morrowind, because originally the Templar Breath of Life would just target anyone in an AoE around you, and then it would bounce to a second target. With Morrowind, it was changed so that it would be a conal for the primary hit. So that's all versions of the ability. And then Breath of Life, of course, bounces to an extra target, and that could bounce behind you or out of the cone. So what this ended up doing a lot of the time is if you weren't facing towards any player that was wounded, you would pick up the primary heal and the bounce would hit somebody behind you or wherever. Any rate, so this has been changed so that it can no longer bounce out of the cone. And I'm assuming it can still hit you. I'm not 100% sure of that. But yeah, this is just standardizing it. Another thing that's kind of interesting about that is that change, because the Warden also has the shrooms, which are in a cone.
Yeah.
And at the time when this change was first announced, I want to say that it wasn't clear that the mushrooms were also going to be conal like this, or people didn't realize that the mushrooms were going to be conal. And as a result, there were a lot of screams about how the Templar were being nerfed, specifically to make the Warden look better, which is kind of ironic now, given that they both operate off that same system.
It is funny because, I mean, Breath of Life, I until I saw this, I mean, I had no idea it was functioning in any sort of conal way because it has no conal animation. You know, it's just a flash down from the sky, so it's very hard to perceive that, I should say.
Yeah. And yeah, because the animation would have been designed when it was just an AoE around you.
Right.
And I don't remember the animation being updated with Morrowind. So that's something that probably could be a little clearer moving forward at some point. But just making the ability work the way it's supposed to is kind of a higher priority than making the animation something else. Truth.
I hope that they do some more extra text for that, explaining it better, because I mean, really, there's nothing in the game since it doesn't have a conal factor like Shrooms does. Then it's going to be harder for players. But
I'll be honest, at this point in the game's life, with the way the Templar has changed and the way the Warden's changed over the last 2 years, I wouldn't really object to this going back to an AoE around the player, simply so it gives Templars more freedom of position, because that would differ them from the Warden significantly.
Yeah, that's actually the one funny thing about it is we always refer to the Templar when people are chatting on Twitch as one that doesn't have positional gameplay like the Warden does. So, I mean, other than his combat prayer being off the resto staff, then, otherwise you can just do whatever you want anywhere. Yeah. Very interesting. Cleansing Ritual, which I very rarely use, is getting a change. This ability and its morphs will now grant healing and or damage based on the user's highest offensive stats rather than just magic and spell damage. That puts this as a potential stamina heal then. Is that right, Sark?
Yeah, and I'm actually really surprised and really interested in that. So up until this point, if you wanted to run a stam healer, your only option was a fairly specific Warden setup. This is going to start opening that up to Templars. If they keep doing this, I'm going to be really excited for where that could go.
That'd be very, very cool. And let's see, there's also a note here that Ritual of Retribution, the morph, fixed an issue where the damage from the morph could not critically strike. So just a little addition in there. If you're interested in Cleansing Ritual, you might want to read up on those patch notes because it might become something very viable in a different way that we haven't looked at it before. Yeah. So very cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to this at all, and I didn't know it couldn't critically strike. So that's
that sounds like okay. So that's something going through this, and you mentioned we're pulling out some specific stuff. There's a lot of stuff here where it's like they fixed an issue with something, or they've slightly tweaked values. We do have the patch notes open in front of us, so when you're looking at something like, I'm gonna have to search through it to find the Templar again. But
Control F.
That's what I'm doing. So it's like we've got stuff like focus charge, reduce the damage dealt by the ability, and toppling charge morph by approximately 8%. So like there's a bunch of stuff where it's like, okay, this has been changed a little bit here to bring it in line with other abilities, or something like Piercing Javelin's getting extra half second on its binding effect, which it's cool. Like it's a stun. It's now going to last for a full 4 seconds rather than 3.5. But it's not, these aren't really huge changes to the skills. And because there's an absolute ton of these things, it is possible to miss a few on the way through.
Oh, gosh, yes.
We're picking up the stuff that we see and we recognize, and we're like, oh, yeah, this is a major change. And we're probably missing some minor stuff, especially on classes we don't spend a lot of time with.
This is a massive document that I encourage you guys to go through. It is how many posts here in a row? It is on its own 17 forum posts, the actual thing itself. So the patch notes for 5.0. So make sure you go look at those on your own time. Moving on to the sorcerer, which I never play, Daedric Prey now functions as a pet taunt, like a heavy attack. What the heck does that mean, Stark?
Okay, so in the game as it exists on live right now, your pets will attack whomever they want initially. And when you heavy attack a target, it will function like a taunt for your pets. Your pets will immediately turn and start attacking that target. What Daedric Prey has done is it now lets you apply a taunt for your pets to a specific target without having to commit the time to a heavy attack. So
wow,
you can designate a target and your pets will now chase it. Now, that's going to affect the both either the versions of the Scamp or the Clan Fear, and it's going to affect the Twilight. So there's not all for the classes in the game, the Sork has the most permanent pets, but that's only 2.
Right.
So you're just going to throw 2 targets at it, 3 if you've got your Storm Atro up. Also, if you've got stuff like Maw of the Infernal up, that's probably also going to be affected by this, though I haven't tested that. So it will pick targets and it will send them all off after that specific target. It's going to be useful for pet control, for actually managing your pets and designating a target. It's probably going to be pretty significant in PvP as well, because it will let you, again, designate a target for your pets to go harass without having to dedicate the time to a heavy attack and, they'll have the long lead up. You just tell them to go after that guy.
Wow.
So yeah, it's going to be really nice for pet Sorks.
Interesting.
Streak is another one that's interesting. So this is, you don't usually see this in Stam builds. It's still useful and viable there, but you don't see it that often. It's now going to, as with Cleansing Ritual, pick the higher damage pool between Stamina and Magicka, and then use the larger pool to deal damage with. Streak is not usually something I think of as a damage source. I usually think of it just as the ability to relocate on a whim, but again, I'm actually really happy to see this, even if it's not going to be a significant amount of damage.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad because I don't know anything about sorcerers, but
it's a really fun class once you get the hang of it.
Go out and be your best Sork with all these changes.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Nightblade here. Grim Focus no longer provides minor brutality. Now, that's something even I've heard about, and I'm not a super big Nightblade player.
Yeah, there's actually a bunch of changes with Grim Focus. One of them is there's also now a self-heal attached to it. There have been changes in the travel time for the projectile. On the whole, and this is, when you look at the Nightblade changes, there's a couple of major nerfs here. When you play them, you don't feel the nerfs as much. And some of the changes are actually significant now in ways they didn't used to be. So anybody who's saying, okay, it's time to bury the Nightblade, especially the Stam Blade, is being a bit premature, because they're now actually bringing some unique things to the table. Losing minor brutality it hurts a little bit, because that was just an extra, okay, here's 8% damage bonus you get, and you just always have this without having to worry about the healer keeping combat prayer time up. But it's not the end of the world, and there are other ways to get minor brutality, so that's something, if you really think you need it, you can get from other sources. On the whole, though, I'm actually kind of happy with this, because there is a big change with surprise attack also. So this is one that starts off as a nerf as well. They lose major fracture. That's a debuff that you usually get from your tank, so it should be on a boss in a group content situation anyway. And if it's not, if you're off there picking off ads or something else, you can apply it with Mark Target.
Oh, okay.
Which a lot of Stam Blades and a lot of Night Blades in general don't want to run, simply because I can debuff them. Well, Stam Blades in particular, I can debuff them anyway with surprise attack. Why do I run this other ability?
Right.
But if you absolutely need to be able to apply Breach and Fracture to a target from a Night Blade, you can already do that. You can do that at range. The change with surprise attack is if you're flanking when you hit with it, it will now apply a 5% debuff to the target's physical resistance. Now, that's going to be less than Major Fracture, but it's a new unique debuff.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be an extra 5% shaved off of their total resists before anything else applies. So before Alkosh applies, before your fracture and breaches apply. Well, breach is not going to apply to physical, but before fracture applies, anything else like Crusher and Chance are going to apply after this. So you take 5% off, and then other people start chipping it down. That's, in group situations, actually kind of significant.
Huh. I think this is I see why there's so much. There's a lot of changes to this, and I see why people are so vocal about them.
So it's changed the Nightblade, because before the Nightblade had this mechanic where it was like, okay, I'll just run in, I'll slash them with this, and I'm going to reduce their physical armor, and then I'm going to start carving them up. Makes sense. That's simple. It's understandable. The changes are now going to encourage you to come in from the flanks. So it's actually going to encourage you to tank and spank.
Wow.
So you come in from the side and you start shanking them and reduce their resists there on top of what the tank is already doing. Because before, if you've got a tank to control it, that debuff doesn't matter because the tank's already applying it. So, yeah, on the whole, it is a nerf, but it's coming with enough changes that make it alter the way the class plays and feels. There are some other changes too. There's some stuff like the version of Cloak that provides a self-heal has been changed. And so again, like, we're skimming over a bunch of these things.
Yes.
But
the essence of time.
Yeah. And in the case of the Nightblade, though, like, having actually brought that into vet content post changes, it feels like it has a little bit more identity, and it didn't feel like the damage wasn't there. So, yeah, no, Nightblade is not dead. Standblade, at least, is not dead. And I'm certain that the Magblade is not. So, here we are. It's still really cool.
Yay for not killing anything.
This one is one that I've seen referenced, and I've seen it in the notes, and I've heard so much salt about it.
Lay it on us, Stark.
Dragon Knight's Reflective Scales is now only going to provide 50% mitigation.
Oh, no.
So, you don't do DKs,
No.
and I almost don't do DKs. Reflective Scales is an ability right now on live that will reflect incoming damage from projectile attacks and provide complete immunity.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Complete immunity.
Yeah. So when you go into a battleground and somebody pops Reflective Scales and you try to damage them down with ranged attacks, including your light attack from your destruction staff or from your bow or any number of other abilities, those just bounce back and kill you.
Oh, wow.
So what this is going to do is it's going to change it to 50% mitigation, and this is going to sting for DKs because that is actually a pretty big nerf.
That is
They
large.
used to have the ability to just, like, it's not all damage in the game, it's specific damage sources, but they could just ignore them.
Wow.
And now that's still going to apply half damage to them.
That is big. That is very big. Much bigger than I first thought it was until you explained it like that.
Well, and when you actually break down the full list of things that count as projectiles, it includes some stuff that really surprises you. I'm not able to do that off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I had to sit down with somebody a couple of months ago where I was like, you understand how many things this blocks, right? And they're like, no, like everything.
Wow.
It's a huge list. And it's unfortunate to see something like this go away, but I'm not going to, I'm surprised it's been there as long as it has in the condition it has for an ability that's not an ultimate.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, because you can spam Reflective Scales.
That's insane. And it probably explains why Dragon Knights, more than any other class in Cyrodiil, and I admit I'm not a PvP expert, but more than any class, they are the ones that I will see single-handedly be able to take out, like, a team of 5 or so people. Now, usually we're not in there, as the biggest bad PvPers in the world, but still one DK, and it's usually just DKs, and you can tell them because they're flying and they're fire and all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and you see the wings flapping and stuff. Yeah, and that's the thing where the Reflective Scales fires off, and then suddenly you're taking damage when you check your death recap. It's including abilities from the wrong classes.
God, okay.
Yeah, that's how that happens. So if you ever see a DK kill you with crystal shards or something, that's because you're a Sork and you hit them with crystal shards and it got bounced back to you.
Wow. Okay. I'm pretty happy to see this is being mitigated. I'm not going to lie. Sorry, DKs. I love you.
It's still going to be good too, because there's still a morph of that provides CC immunity.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's Reflective Scales is not getting binned. It's not going to be like, oh, I can't use this ability anymore. It's just this primary use of it to just soak off absurd amounts of ranged damage is going away.
That is interesting. Huh. Well, I'm down with it.
Yep. Here's another one that hurts, and this actually hurts me a lot.
No, but
Falcon Swiftness is losing major endurance.
Ooh.
Okay, so
that's big.
Falcon Swiftness, we went from one wing's ability to the other wing's ability. For Wardens, Falcon Swiftness, it gives you the ability to regenerate stamina more quickly and gives you the ability to move faster for a brief period of time. And the two morphs of it either grant you evasion, minor evasion, or grant you minor berserk.
Okay.
Oh, wow. I just realized in the notes, I kept saying brutality. It's Nightblade lost minor berserk, not minor brutality.
Oh, well,
brutality is weapon damage up only. Berserk is all damage up. Sorry.
Oopsies. Correction.
Yeah. Minor error there.
Yeah,
These notes. Okay.
They got it in their same episode.
With Falcon Swiftness, with Bird of Prey, it actually gives you minor berserk, and with Elusive Predator, it gives you minor evasion, which is AoE damage resist. And those bonus benefits are passive. Like when it was first introduced to the game, you had to keep it up to maintain those bonuses, and then that was changed with Somerset so that they were passive while it's slotted. So Wardens had to rearrange their bars, so they made sure that their Bird of Prey was on the front bar, so they'd actually get the bonus damage where they wanted it, instead of trying to maintain it on the back bar and flip over. The thing is, the upgraded versions of it, the morphs are still going to see use because those haven't been nerfed. It's just your stamina recovery is going away from this, and as a result, the major expedition bonus, so the increased movement speed is going to be increased to 6 seconds. So it's not a bad change. It's just not going to regenerate stamina as quickly, but we're on a Warden, so we've already got the Netch pet, which means we can already regenerate resources at an absurd rate.
Wow.
So,
well,
it's going to weaken Stamdens a little bit, but it's not going to matter that much. Also, major endurance is also provided by stamina pots. So any potion you make that provides restore stamina already applies major endurance to you. So if you're paying attention to your potion up times for end game content, you're going to have that buff regardless.
Gotcha.
And you're not going to see any change here.
The more you know. I feel like I've learned something along the way. Now we're moving into some weapon changes here, starting with dual wield. Whirlwind, Whirling Blade Morph, is now the only execute for this ability.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So on live right now, all versions of Whirlwind have an execute effect.
Wow.
It's not a strong execute. I want to say offhand it's about 25%, but this is on a weapon line that already has a passive execute effect. So what they've done is they've gone back, they've looked at Whirlwind, and they've selected the Whirling Blades to have an execute effect, and they removed it from the base ability and the other morph. Steel Tornado, I believe.
Spin to win. Sorry, what?
No, that's the one.
Yeah, this is interesting. How are people receiving this change? This is a good one, or are they?
I've seen some salt on the PTS forums, but I see a lot of salt there for a lot of things. I like this a little bit. I don't usually think of Whirlwind as an execute in general, and I don't think of the dual wield execute effect simply because it's not very strong. But I say that as somebody who mains a Nightblade, and so I'm used to the nice chunky 300% multipliers, and this is less than 100% bonus.
Wow, okay.
The other thing is I also come off of two-handers a lot for when I'm looking for an execute and I can't have it in class. And reverse slice is also a much chunkier execute than Whirlwind. So again, I look at this and it's like, oh, it's an AoE execute. That's great. I don't even think of it as an execute. That actually reminds me though, because in putting the notes together, there was one fairly significant change for two-hander that we skimmed over and then didn't get in the notes. So I'll hit that right now before we move on.
Yeah, do it.
Cleave is a conal AoE that you strike with that right now on live hits everybody with a bleed. And then the morphs of it are going to give you minor heroism, which regenerates ultimate faster, or apply a damage shield to you based on the number of enemies you hit with it. So changes are the base version of it and the version that applies the damage shield, Brawler, will no longer have a bleed effect. And Carve, the version that applies minor heroism, will no longer have minor heroism. This is kind of unfortunate because that was one really nice way to generate ultimate for the two-hander. It's not the end of the world, but it does mean that there's going to be a specific one you pick to deal bleed damage versus just using any version. And the damage shield's also been rebalanced a little bit. So the damage shield is actually stronger with a weaker benefit for extra targets, whereas right now it's a little weaker, but gets a much larger bonus for each target you hit.
Wow. I don't really do any two-handed weaponry, so...
It's not a common pick for PvE DPS. I usually see them in PvP. I really like it for alt gen, which, well, rip me.
Right. Jeez. There's some interesting changes coming through here. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
Bows, arrow spray, and acid spray lost their snare, but now deal increased damage. Bombard still applies on immobilize and snare.
Okay, so
that's a lot.
Acid spray used to be a pretty good way to snare a cone in front of you.
Yep.
It's kind of analogous to checking out caltrops.
Yep.
And that's not going to happen anymore. So you're going to actually need to run caltrops for that effect. The trade-off is if you're one of the players who actually runs a tank and you use that to get your long-range CC effect to actually immobilize, Bombard is still going to work the way it does on live. That's not being changed. That option has not been removed from you. But if you were trying to do damage with it, the other side of this is like there has actually been a damage increase to both arrow spray and acid spray, and that damage increase is going to be very nice because that's going to make it more appealing just to use it for the damage, as opposed to using it to hold things in place while you put other DOTs on them.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Speaking of snares, Destro Staff, Wall of Frost is now only a 40% snare. That is down from 60.
Yeah, this is... Okay, so to a certain extent, this is the kind of stuff we're skipping over for the most part because it's just a fairly minor change. It's just in this case, and this is, again, I think that's going to affect tanks, Wall of Frost was really nice because it did give your tank a long-range CC effect, and now it's being weakened to the same tier as caltrops, which is, it's unfortunate, but it's out there. I don't think it's going to change. If you're wanting to run a Frost Staff on your tank, specifically for that effect, it's not going to change anything. You're still going to run it, but it is unfortunate if you were counting on a slightly stronger immobilize from it than you used to have. Well, snare than you used to have.
Yeah, and I guess maybe this is also a time to remind people, we'll say this again at the end, I'm sure, but don't be too worried about all these, see all these changes play out on the PTS if you want to go on there and play with them. Keep in mind, there's still time before this hits live. If you have feedback on them, the better thought out the feedback is, the better it will be received. So as a reminder, please don't send ZeniMax things that are just all caps. You've broken my class, brah. If you're going to send feedback, be like, well, here's why, I find this thing's not working correctly for this situation. Use because they do listen to feedback. But
the other thing about all of this is, and this is kind of a general theme going through here, there's a lot of stuff where it's kind of like, if you play this, it hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're stepping back and you're looking at your options as a player, some of this stuff was overperforming. And the Destro Staff's a really good example of that with Wall of Frost, because straight up, if you wanted to put a snare on people, that was one of the best in the game just for the amount it applied. Not, best range, not the best damage follow-up, not, the best toolkit on the rest of the staff. Just, this will put a harder snare on them than any other ability in the game, short of a full immobilize. So when you're looking at stuff like this, it's like, okay, I can see why this stuff's getting toned down. It stings, because again, like if you were counting on it for PvP, which is admittedly the only place I use a Frost Staff, you put that down, players can't get out of it. They're going to keep taking damage. They have no escape, and then they die. And this is going to make it a little easier for them to get out of the way. But if you've got a thing where the only counterplay is you die, that's not really a good situation.
Right. That's, I've heard that from the Nightblade players too, at least the one I hang out with the most. And he said, the DPS we've been able to output is insanely through the roof. If you look at single target, testing it off a dummy. And we talked about that with iNote, how dummies aren't accurate situational things. But, he's like, it is so high right now that some of these changes are well warranted to get us back in range of other. And that's a very good way to look at it. Like, I'm enjoying how the Necromancer plays, but knowing it's going to get nerfed down is fine. Like, we do, what I do want is a nice balance where everyone, because the thing I hate the most, everyone here that knows me knows this, but I can't stand when people come in and say, well, what's the best of the best. And it's like, really, we don't want a best. We want something that's going to work best for you, but not the best thing, period. Like if Templars were the only viable healer, what a boring world we'd live in. And actually, this is probably a good time to talk about this too.
I've lived in that world. It was kind of boring.
Yeah, you have. And, I've gotten that question too, people saying, and I'm kind of almost surprised I've been getting the question. Like, I don't know where it comes from. But people saying, well, can the Necromancer heal? Can it tank? Can it DPS? And I'm like,
I suspect where that's coming from is if you're coming from another game.
I think you're right. But also, some of the people I know are very awesome people that I think have been playing ESO for at least a couple months now. And I look and I go like, of course I can. Like,
yeah, that's not enough time to really get I'm sorry. That's not enough time to really get a handle on the game to an extensive degree, right? Like if you're coming to the game in your first couple of months and you can see, okay, so here's somebody out here and they've got a Nightblade healer build, right? Mm-hmm. Does that actually tell you the Nightblade can heal, or does that tell you that they are a good enough player that they're willing to take the handicap and can work around a class that really can't?
Yeah, I guess it's a weird change of thinking, because I mean, the handicap is usually on the player, not the class.
Yeah.
And so that's where, and what I mean by that, everybody, is I don't love the conal nature of a warden. Can a warden can a person hop on a warden and out heal my Templar? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, if I swap onto that warden, can I out heal my own Templar? Probably not, because I don't play super well with him. I play better with a Templar.
Yeah.
And that's strictly because of the skill sets. Meaning the toolkit given to you will be different for everyone that hops in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, like, if the Templar was something you also played, like if you specialized in both of those classes and came to it was roughly equal skill on them, you probably could out heal your Templar on your warden, but you'd give up your utility. Like that's kind of where the balance is on those.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know. I think if we're going at it like that, then the question itself is invalid, right? Because if we're saying, and it's what people are saying, so that's why we're bringing it up. But yeah, I wouldn't get too caught in the weeds with that idea. It's more of a question of like, is only one valid or healing class valid? It's like, no.
Yeah, the answer is no.
So that's where I get confused. I mean, I understand people are coming with that question with a good one, but I guess we'll end the statement being that, Templar or Necromancer can do everything. Everything can do everything. And if you can't do it, it means your skill set, you as a human, you're not there yet, because you can spend an extra couple weeks practicing and get there with it. It probably isn't something you're personally synergizing with it for, because I know it happens to me all the time. Go ahead.
So far as it goes, though, for MMOs in general, and like we've both played a number of them, that is kind of unusual.
Oh, very much so.
So even when you're coming into ESO and starting out and you're looking at it and when you just start out and you're like, okay, well, I want to play a tank, most of the time when somebody comes back with an answer, they're going to give you they'll tell you to do a warden or they'll tell you to do a DK. And most of the time it's going to be the DK. And that can promote the idea that, oh, hey, a Templar tank isn't a real thing, or a Nightblade tank isn't a real thing, or a Sork tank isn't a real thing. And to be honest, I've gone into content with my Sork tank and gotten responses from players who I know are experienced enough to understand this, who are like, wait, a Sork tank? So, yeah.
Yeah, I've actually
Why is this strange to you?
Never witnessed a Templar tank, for the record. Never seen someone do it.
I've run one. Okay. You can tank on a Templar, but it's unpleasant, at least for me, because the lack of in-class CC is brutal.
I feel like that's what it would be like to heal on a Sork for the most part, to be honest. I'm just like,
okay, yeah, but that's another one where the state of mind changes, because your primary in-class heal is the Wing of Twilight, and that thing actually turns out some pretty decent heals these days.
Interesting.
So it's doable, but you're actually healing through a pet. It's a weird state to be in.
Yeah, that is. The moral of the story is, yes, a lot of these classes need to be brought in line so that everything is valid in combat. So if you're seeing a decrease to your class, don't get rid of it. Just retest it and see how you like it. getting back in line with what we're talking about here, guild skill changes, the Psijic Order. We are looking at a change to Mend Wounds, which will no longer cost anything to use. I don't remember what its cost was before. Did you see that earlier today, Star?
Yeah, okay, so right now, the way Mend Wounds works right now is it's a toggle, and it alters your light and heavy attacks. Your light attacks apply a heal over time, your heavy attacks apply a channeled heal, and it costs magicka when you're using these abilities. You can't weave it with anything, because it counts as, when you activate your light or heavy attack, it counts as an ability activation. Ooh. So it's kind of terrible right now on live. Like, I've experimented with it. I think it's a really cool skill, but it just does not deliver. The version on the PTS, however, I'm actually really excited for this, and this comes right off of what we were just talking about, where it's like any class can do anything, because this is a huge get for healers if you can spare the slot. So it no longer costs anything to use. Your light and heavy attacks no longer count as ability activations. They can now be weaved. Your light attacks will heal for the amount of damage your light attacks would normally deal damage for.
Wow.
And your heavy attacks will now heal more consistently with what your heavy attack damage would be, which means it's been reduced, but it's still a channeled heal to the target of your choice. So because this is a guild skill line, anybody can get this. So any class now has the ability to have a heal in place of their light and heavy attacks.
Thank goodness, because as a primary healer, I had no reason to do the Psijic skill line, because it was just like, that thing was such an embarrassment before. I mean, for anyone that was doing it a favor and using it, bless you. It looked really cool. I always wanted it, but I was like, I really know that it has nothing but a bad track record to it. So again, I want all skills to feel love. I don't want any of them nerfed out of existence. Do we have this in here anywhere? Because I guess we skipped over skill line, but I guess on the flip side, without getting too deep in it, we also kind of lose a heal in Panacea. Not that many people were using the Resto Ultimate, but check that guy out in detail. It got nerfed a bit, and it was only really common in PvP. Is the only place I saw it recommended. And now it's getting a little bit of a nerf there. It's getting split, quote unquote.
One morph is getting nerfed. Okay, so Light's Champion used to be granted major protection and also granted major force. Now it's only going to grant major force, which means it'll increase your crit damage, I believe, for 8 seconds at max, and it will no longer protect the target. So it no longer increase their mitigation by 30%.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this because, again, the alternate morph for it is a defensive buff. I think the alternate version is the one that just fires all of the Resto Staff abilities sort of at will constantly to the target. So...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be putting a lot of heals on the target versus one that will be increasing their damage output. I can live with this.
I don't think Panacea can live with this.
I don't think Panacea can live with the game as in general.
I don't think so.
I think as it exists, this is fine.
Yeah, if you're using it, bless up. It's a great. I mean, it's a cool one. But as Stark and I described it off air, we called it's kind of a noob trap, like myself included. I got it, I used it, and then you realize, wow, almost every healing ultimate is significantly more functional than this one is. So
this is actually part of I'm going to just throw criticism out here. This is kind of a theme because I'm sitting here thinking about them, and with the exception of the Destro Staff and maybe the bow, a lot of the weapon ults are kind of underwhelming. And there's some where it's like with the dual wield one and the two-hander one, it's like, okay, these fit thematically, they're fine. But with the Resto Staff, the ult has just always felt kind of like, this is what we get. I've always been sort of underwhelmed by it right from the get-go. So it's like, oh, it's getting nerfed now. It's like, oh, this is an ability I don't actually pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. So, well, go with your mend wounds. Try that one out. Try swapping off Panacea. There you go.
Yeah,
there's your trade-off for today.
I'm really excited for.
Yeah.
I really am, because that's going to be really nice in a number of situations.
Moving on to Alliance War here. Razor Caltrops, Stark. What's going on with those?
The DOT is now going to be delayed and start a second later. The initial tick of damage is going to be significantly increased. So if you're like me and have a really, really bad habit of double casting Caltrops, you're not going to be punished nearly as severely for accidentally emptying your stamina bar in the middle of a fight.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I don't really ever use it since I don't run Stam, but the people are going to be happy about this, or
I think for the most part they are. There might be some salt about the DOTs being delayed. So this is a standard structure in the game. Most abilities that apply a DOT to the target, they'll tick first, then they'll start applying the DOT after that. And in the case of Caltrops and a couple other abilities that have been singled out, including the one we're about to hit in a second, the DOT would start immediately, so you'd get hit twice in the first tick. And that resulted in a little bit more burst than they wanted, apparently. A lot of the stuff's just being standardized out, like I said, so that abilities behave in consistent ways. And for accessibility, that's actually a really good thing because it means you don't have to keep in mind all of these little exceptions floating through.
Yeah. I'm interested in seeing some of these play out in there and see how people adopt them.
Yeah.
Sticking with the stamina side of things, werewolves. There's a change to their bleed damage. Huh?
So this is actually the same thing, and this time it actually kind of stings a little bit because the bleed damage is. So with werewolves, you apply a bleed with your light attack. And you're going to be doing a lot of light attacking because the werewolf doesn't really have a rotation. It's got a bunch of light attacks that do additional bleed damage. There's one floating question here, and I haven't gotten a concrete answer on it yet, is whether your light attacks will reset the timer. Because I've seen a couple of people claiming that the werewolves can't apply bleed damage at all right now. And I haven't seen that in testing, but I haven't spent enough time with werewolves on the PTS because I got distracted by the Necromancer and other cool toys and didn't care to jump on a wolf and check out on a dummy. Also because dummies put me to sleep. But
yeah, no, I get that.
Worst case, it's going to be werewolves will have a little bit of a damage drop from that. Because as it works right now, you hit somebody through your light attack, you start a bleed, you just keep pounding on them to apply more bleeds and more bleeds and more bleeds. But it doesn't actually stack up. It's just refreshing the debuff. And if this change is correct, then it means that there's going to be a minimum 1 second delay every 4 seconds, I think. It's either 4 or every 3, where the bleed will fall off, then come back up. And that's undesirable. But then again, werewolves, if you know what you're doing, werewolves can already put out a lot of damage. So we'll need to see how this shakes out. I haven't seen much complaint on the boards about it. So if this was consistent, I think I would have seen a lot more people salty about it, especially since werewolves have gotten a lot of new players since Wolf Hunter last year. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of attention, so interesting to watch that. Big set change for a healing group, well, healers in general. Earthgore is getting a change. Now, this one kind of, I think, leaked out even earlier that this change was coming through. I stayed pretty tight-lipped on it, but I stopped using Earthgore whenever Symphony of Blades came out, and I'm glad I did because Earthgore is changing from being a group heal down to a single target heal. However, it will now cleanse all debuffs. Earthgore was a lot of bit OP.
It was exceedingly OP before you got to the game, too.
And it was like the go-to healer set recommendation. I mean, it took the top spot for everything. There are people that I'm seeing already abandon their Earthgore. I banished it beforehand, so like I'm glad that I phased out of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm glad I'd weaned off of it before this change ever came through. But like for the people that are considering doing, for the people, you could still use this definitely in specific use cases. Bogdan's will be another good one for you, as will, like I said, Symphony of Blades. That's not going to be healing output. But I think we're going to see a lot of Earthgore change out of PvP and stuff like that because it's pretty much the recommendation for both PvP and PvE.
Yeah. Yeah, and you missed the first round of debuffs on that, or the first round of nerfs on this, because when it originally dropped in the game, it was even stronger heal.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
To the point that it was just kind of this, oh, hey, Earthcore procced. Well, I'm not dying anytime soon. So the heal was brought down. This was shortly after Somerset dropped. And then after that, then we get this, obviously. For as strong as the Earthcore heal is, I can't really fault them on this. And for as widely recommended as it was, I can't fault them on this because it was this sort of situation where Earthcore was the healing set.
Yeah. Truly the best of the best.
Well, not even just the best of the best. Like, this was the only legitimate answer for a lot of players. Like, if you were, even with stuff like Symphony of Blades, like when you're looking at it, you're saying, okay, I don't need Earthcore, then I can do something more useful. But that's because you've already decided you don't need this. You're already good enough without it.
Right.
Not, this isn't the best possible option. There's a phrase I really, really hate, best in slot. And for a long time, this was for healing.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. This is currently on live. This is this is absolutely best in slot for healing. Everything else falls way by the wayside. Bogdan's, like I said, is a second, but it is second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for this game, that is something we never want to see.
Correct.
Like, as players, and the devs don't want to see it either. They do not want a best in slot.
Right.
So
that's why there's like a trillion sets in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is, as much as this hurts, and as much as this is, oh yeah, no, I'm running Earthcore, and now it's not as good as it used to be, this is still a very positive change.
It is.
Even if it burns and stings.
Like I said, go out, snag yourself both Symphony of Blades and Bogdan's, and see. Mm-hmm. Try working with those two. There's also other options for you, but I think really those are the two primary. But I mean, I would try working with those two and just seeing if either of those sits well with you, because I surprisingly very much like Bogdan's. That's a very nice set. Moving on from the first round of patch notes into the second, these are the PTS 5.0.1 notes. Now, we're recording this episode on 4/24, and these came out on what day? It was Monday the 22nd.
22nd, so, yeah.
So these are about 2 days old by the time we're doing it, and it's probably closer to 6 days old when you're listening to this episode. But major changes. So, if we didn't call this out in the first round, those other notes, but they gave a ghost form to players when resurrected by another player. So, you cast a res on somebody in combat, and they actually were getting a 3-second ghost form, which to me, I'm not a fan of this, but I understand there's a lot of reasons to try and help players navigate out of bad AoEs that are there. And Stark pointed out that not everyone knows to hold their res. They accept it as soon as they see it.
Yeah, so there's that, and there's also some fights where you can die. Like right now on live, you can die mid-boss fight, and you cannot be rezzed. I think the ones examples I gave were more like Kenna, the trio in Falkreath and Vet Falkreath.
Yep.
In both of those cases, if you get outside the perimeter of the boss fight, you're just done.
Yep.
You can't be rezzed, because if you are rezzed, you will die immediately from incoming damage. I think this is the case with Symphony of Blades in Depths of Malatar. I don't think you can get back in if you die out on the perimeter, because there's a little wall that comes up on the entrance and the exit. I think if you're in there, you're toast. And there's also some situations like Assembly General at the end of Halls of Fabrication, where you can die in poison and you just can't be rezzed while you're there. So I think in all of these cases, this is going to, like, the ghost form actually gives you time to get out of it while you're immune to damage. Mm-hmm. The problem is, because you have no control over how long that 3 seconds lasts, once you are in a safe space, you can't cancel out of it the way you can with something like Mist Form.
Right.
So you can't, you're just stuck like this, and it screws up the tempo of fights. It really does. It
really does. So we kind of both share the opinion that this needs a revision or to be revisited for all boss fights, because as a healer, I know a very common tactic will be someone will do a borderline sacrificial resurrection on me. So they'll come up and they'll take a lot of hits and they'll get me up. But knowing that with my Templar, I can just, I immediately, I have muscle memory, I breath of life as soon as I get up. It brings my health and theirs back up, and we're ready to continue going on the fight. But this changes the whole tempo, and what I'm seeing more of, and this is off of my Templar but onto a Necromancer on the PTS, was that people were coming over, they're rezzing me, they are low on health, very low on health by the time I'm actually rezzed, but now I'm in a ghost form for 3 seconds, and 2 seconds again to ghost form, they're dead. And so now we start a merry-go-round sort of situation of rezzing. We're just chasing each other's, chasing the tail of the person in front of you the whole way in this massive circle. And actually that kind of happened to us in a couple fights where we weren't even really fighting the boss. We were just more like playing a resurrection game. And so this thing actually defeats a lot of, and it's going to be harder for certain fights. So, for example, I can't, there are boss fights out there. I think a good example might be Scale Color Peak. Definitely the Vet Fang Lair hard mode where all the walls are flying at you. Symphony of Blades as well can be difficult to get reses off. There's going to be certain fights where clutch reses are almost mandatory if someone dies. And I don't know what you're going to do about that when everyone's stuck in ghost form.
Yeah.
So the reason we put this in this section of the notes is that it actually got disabled for a little bit here, probably temporary disable, as it might actually be screwing with some mechanics, I think is what you were alluding to.
That's my suspicion. Yeah. I suspect that there are some bosses where if you've got people in ghost form and you've technically had a wipe, the boss doesn't properly reset. Which might have been what happened. I wonder if that's what happened to us in that March of Sacrifices run where everything started going completely weird.
Oh, that's right. We did do that. We did a... Yeah, we did. You brought a... Who was that? A Nightblade? Were you on?
I brought a Nightblade, yeah.
And the rest of us were on Necros as we did that.
Yeah, you were on Necros, yeah.
Yeah, it really screwed up the boss fight. Something did, and it wasn't... Yeah,
something did, yeah. Like, it was not... The mechanics weren't firing properly, so I wonder if that's related to this.
Could very well be.
Yeah.
Now, keeping in the idea of resurrections, this one is a super blessing.
Oh, yeah.
The Necromancer's reanimate ability will get, the ability and its morphs will now require a confirmation to accept the resurrection. That thing was problematic, not having that button before, because especially when we played it at ZeniMax, we were doing the trial for the first time, and I would throw down a res and people would get insta-wiped. So talk about that problem where, some people are resing in the poop. This time, they can't decide, previously they haven't been able to decide if they're getting up in the poop or not. And the funny thing is, and this is just a human error thing, and it's not even a bad one, but I think if you look at your own play style, it's insane how quickly we detach ourselves from the computer whenever we see that we're dead in combat. Like, that's our time, our minute to be like, I can exercise. My fingers don't need to be on the keys. Hooray! But when you get a necro res and it's like, bam, you're up. I see people, like when we were at ZeniMax, people were looking away from the screen. In real life, that's when people were checking their phone or something like that, and it was causing a ton of problems. So having the ability to choose that you're ready to come back is a blessing. I think that's going to be a very popular spell, and it's definitely going to change a lot of the boss mechanics. So I am very curious to see them revisit both of these ghost form things.
Yeah. On the downside, we do lose the troll option of bringing people up against their will. So you'll never get the option to force Gan to back into your service again.
Gan, get up! Call out to Gan the Impaler, wherever you are right now, probably working your butt off. Stamina morphs for the Necromancer got changed, and I think these make probably sense and are probably going to make people happy that they can't be silenced.
Yeah. So this is kind of normal, and I think it was just they missed flagging these. No, I think they missed flagging these. I remember a mention from somebody in the class rep trip that was talking about how they had fewer stam morphs to pick from, and I kind of suspect these 5 were originally mag morphs and then got reworked after the feedback.
Skeletal Archer definitely was.
That was. I wonder about Venom Skull. So Venom Skull, Blighted Blast, Bone Skilled Archer, Detonating Siphon, and Ruinous Scythe are all stam morphs for Necromancer abilities. And before, apparently, in the 5.0 version of the PTS, they could be silenced.
Wow.
There was also a I want to say it was Silver Leash could get silenced up until like a patch or 2 ago. So this is not unheard of. You get stam abilities that can be silenced unintentionally, and then somebody from ZOS goes through and finds out that these can be silenced and gives them the immunity to that effect. So they're now stam abilities. They are not subject to silence as intended, and they got cleaned up.
Excellent.
Yeah.
For all the people... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it's going to be really nice for stam necromancers because, now you don't have to worry about some of your abilities getting locked out when you're hit by a silence effect. And now you can, if you never realized what the Sun Eaters do in Mauve Lorcage, now you can continue on in your ignorance while the mags freak out.
P.S. Stamina, very fun. Very, very fun to play on the Necromancer. Stark and I actually did that together at like 3 or 4 in the morning, our times respectively here. And
we were just running around tearing shit up. It was great.
Just in Elsewhere, just running around, playing with all the skills. Because my character definitely wasn't even really set up in any proper way. I just thrown them together to kind of show people what it was like to play a stamina version, and he was very fun. It definitely felt like a Necromancer that was just a Stamorph version. So, I mean, and that's what we wanted, right? We wanted a class that feels, and I had almost no standard stamina weapons in use. I don't think I was using any of the generic go-to stam things. So I didn't have caltrops or bow spell skills or dual wield anything. And he was just going around knocking things down left, right. No, we were in the overland area just killing stuff, but it was very fun to not, have a stam class locked to the same.
Yeah, I was running Momentum from the 2-hand skill because it's actually recommended on the list for the because I use the build advisor because why not?
Oh yeah.
So it was recommending Momentum, which is fine. Like that's a fairly decent self heal, and oddly enough, something that they do have in class, but it's still a good one to have, especially with the buff. And then was also running Poison Injection and Acid Spray because the Necromancer has an increase to all DOTs, and those are both some pretty solid DOTs. So that's a lot of damage like that, and then everything else was Necromancer abilities.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think people are going to really like this one. I can tell you, I will continue. I'm going to definitely make a Stam version of the Necro at some point. It's definitely not going to help that I already like these spell effects are beautiful, by the way.
They really are.
Like, this is some serious work that went into them. I will also warn people, I think this is a good time to say it as well, since we're just on the Necro for a second, that I've heard concerns way prior to people seeing the Necro spells of having light sensitivity and people wanting the game to have a feature that turns that down in some way. Well, we don't have that, and the Necromancer skills are actually a lot more aggressive. So if you're someone that now has some sort of thing like that, you might want to look into either programs for your computer that you might be able to get some control with, or potentially glasses that might alter that for you. Because I will say that I love the Necromancer skills as they are, and I personally don't want them turned down, but I also wish everyone could individually tweak their effects better.
For what it's worth, you can adjust your visuals by tweaking either your monitor or possibly via your graphics card settings if you're on PC. Because I know that with both of my monitors, I've got a lot of customizability in how they display colors and light.
Yep.
So you can always turn down the brightness or adjust the contrast settings on that. It's going to take something where you'd have to fiddle around with it until you get the right tone for yourself and what you want. But that is something you shouldn't overlook if this is actually an accessibility issue.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I've heard. I've heard people saying, it really gives me headaches or it does whatever. And I've got to say, when the Necromancer hits live, but this way where you're at least getting about a month to prep for it, whatever you need to do, because take care. We don't want you getting, hurt in any way, shape, or form over this class. But the animations are beautiful and big and bright, and they're doing a lot all at once, and that when you're pugging, you're probably going to see 3 out of every 4 people as a Necromancer for that first couple weeks. So yeah, right? So take care of yourself. Look into that now before it gets too close. Moving back into this list here with crafting items, this is just a small call out. The Dragonbone style that's part of the collector's edition.
It's the collector's edition.
I couldn't remember for a second there. It was not searchable under your collection. So when people kept asking me, put it on, and I was out in the middle of the field, I couldn't actually do that. So if you're there, you can just call up the look of it directly through your collections now, as it should be. So go ahead and do that to test it out.
That's weird. Well, I was remembering searching that, though. I wonder if this is specifically... Did you copy the way that was phrased in the notes?
I did, yes.
Okay, so yeah, that's right. So the change here isn't actually that you couldn't search it. The change here is that you wrote it as a compound word, and it's actually 2 words. So the compound word Dragonbone will now actually show you the style, even though the style uses 2 words.
So we've all been the derp here, is what you're saying. It's actually always been there? I don't think it was. I searched just dragon. I rarely spell out the whole thing.
Okay. I don't know, because I did find it, though it might have been that I was finding it in the outfit station.
Oh, I don't think that was the problem. You might be right, though. Dragon Bone style will now appear when you're searching for Dragon Bone. I mean, I think you're right in reading it the way it is, but I never type out the whole word because I never know how to spell anything in this game. So when people are like, oh, I can't even think of a set. Oh, I mean, even when they're like, put on Dark Brotherhood or whatever, I'm just like, dark, because I don't even know what it's called, because they're not all named properly either. They got weird, unique slang to it.
Some do, yeah.
I don't know if that was why, but I couldn't find it in there before, so who knows? But at least thanks for covering our butts, ZeniMax, and knowing that we are all derps and can't spell anything, so thanks.
I can't spell either. I'll just type a couple of words. This is nice, though, because I used to get, I'd search Dragon, and I get like 3 styles, or 4 styles.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool things coming to PTS. I just threw this in there as a kind of an end cap to the episode. We're running out of time here, so if you want to shout out anything too, Stark, I just want to say there's a very cool mummified Alfiq cat. That will be one that you're going to be putting together, much in the same way you do in, was it Carnvassen or whatever that place is called in Somerset? Yeah, build a bear, but it's build a cat. This one literally is, though, a build a bear. Like you're going, I mean, it is a mummified cat, so you can pick its pieces up individually, I'm sure, and sew them together to make. No, I'm just kidding. It is a very cool, creepy looking little pet, though. Not customizable. Sorry, I realized I was selling people a bill of goods. That's not happening. Yeah, but you do collect it in the same way. God.
Actually, do you? I noticed with, so there was a change with the event, with the April Fool's event, the Jester's Festival, where instead of it being you collect 7 different pieces of a memento and then you put them all together, it was collect 5 tokens for the memento, basically, and then consume all 5, and then it would convert and give you an achievement and put it in your inventory. I want to say with the stuff with the public dungeons where it's collect tokens this time, it's a specific one. It's not collect all 7 pieces and then put them together. It's collect a total of like 5 or 10 of any kind and then just cram them together. So I want to say that was a change, but it's something I didn't pay a lot of attention to. If that has been a change across the board for these things, I'm really happy with that, because before it was always this weird situation where it's like I'm trying to put together this swamp jelly pet from the Murkmire prologue, and I need this piece and that piece and this other piece, and I've got these 3 pieces, but I keep getting this one repeatedly. Whereas with this, it's just like, okay, well, you just need 5 or 10 or whatever total, and you just consume them one at a time or consume them all at once, doesn't matter. And then you get the reward. I really prefer that, simply because you're not praying to RN Jesus constantly, hoping you get the right thing. Yeah.
Because this will be something I go and farm, because I want this little bastard.
Yeah. So that was the thing that caught my attention, but I want to make sure that that's actually the thing.
I don't see too much, like the patch notes aren't really speaking to me in that way necessarily, but I am a big fan. I hope that becomes the case, because like Stark's saying, it's very annoying to have like, where they take 5 pieces or something, and to have like 3 out of 5 of them in your bank, and it's like, ugh, they're just taking up more room. But I don't want to get rid of them, and they don't really sell.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it. It's called the Grizzly Mummy Tabby Pet, obtained by completing the Alfiq Mummy Master Achievement. Yeah, I think that achievement is actually eat 5 or eat 10 of the little tokens for that. So that's actually a nice change. It's and there's a similar one, the Urn Smash Memento, obtained from completing the. Oh no, it's a quest reward. That's just quite. I can't even talk about that. I know there's another one. It's the same thing. It's like complete the achievement, and that'll get you the other goodie. But yeah, so what's this? Oh yeah, it's the Dragon Break achievement. Okay, so that's the mount. But yeah, I like the new system.
Me too.
Because that's going to be a lot friendlier than because we've had. I think it's now been 2 years where we've been getting these things where it's like, it's 7 pieces for a given pet or a given costume, and you have to get each of the 7 pieces and put it all together. And that does make sense from a sort of lore perspective and an immersion perspective, where it's like, okay, I need the tools and I need the fabric and I need the sacramental bell and all these other things. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, this is still, I want to be able to put this together, and I don't really care about this thing chewing up 7 inventory slots.
7's a lot. That's a lot of slots for what's going to soon potentially be just a pet that you never even use. Like that matters. So Agreed. I like that. That stands better. Moving on from the pet for a second, Guild Finder. Now that is cool, but I think it needs help still. Kudos to the UI team. I think it's very neat. For those that don't know, we've kind of talked about this in many of our episodes, the hype episodes before, but I got to play with it. It is a very cool system where you can list your guild, you list your primary and secondary interests for your guild. So it could be like PvP first, PvE second, or social first, PvE second, whatever you want to do, any of these huge combinations. And then you get spots to like write and advertise what your guild does. And if people are interested in it, they can apply for it. And I think it's going to change the world, especially for people that are running larger guilds, to be able to accept this. The biggest thing that it's lacking, and this is a major lacking thing when you're walking into the world of forums and applications, is that it has no meaningful application page with checkboxes to form like yes or no questions. Like they just apply flat out. They see your listing, they apply. Done.
Yeah.
You get to see, I think, some of their like, I actually don't really know what you all get from them. I think it gives you a little like a brief summary of that person, but it doesn't even say why they're interested in joining you. Like it's almost as unuseful as it is potentially soon to be useful. Did you look at it, Sark?
I did not. And okay, so I suspect what's going on here is this is kind of, this is going to sound wrong. You're not really in the market for this upgrade. For this system, because you already have a system in mind for this,
right,
for what you're looking for. This is for guild masters who want to put their guild out there, want to say, hey, come here, join us, and don't know how to interface with people to find potential members.
I would agree with that, but then I would beg the question of, should we even have this mechanism as the way it is? Meaning, it is a very cool one, so no offense to the UI team, and you're right, but I think that we're a very mature game with a mature rating, and therefore there's a lot of people here that do know what they want, and I don't think I'm in the small minority when I say that. I think you're right. There's definitely people that just want to advertise and billboard, but I think we also... I don't think the dev dollars went to the right spot if this is where we end up with. Sorry, ZeniMax. But like, we're still missing hitting your very strong guilds. Like you just undersold a product to them.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm not sure if this is... Yeah, that's the thing about this. I'm not sure if this is actually aimed at the guilds who already have a strong recruitment process, so much as it's aimed at the guilds that are just getting started and don't know how to get started.
Because my thinking is, if you're a guild that doesn't know how to get started, you shouldn't be starting a guild. And this is coming from a guy that has started a ton of guilds and not knowing what he's doing. Like, I'm not saying this from Mount High, being like, look at me, I'm fancy. I am a guy that even just a year and a half ago in World of Warcraft, I started a guild and barely got it to 10 people. So like, just recently I was in this boat. And this is the only guild, the ESO one's the only one that I have that has grown in any meaningful way. So all up to this point in other MMOs, my guilds were always those little like 3-person ones. That's like, why are we even a guild, really? And so if you're at that point where you don't have an application thing, the tool here is neat. But even at the most basic level, why is anyone applying for your guild? And it's going to get spammy too. And guild recruitment already is a little bit spammy. But the idea that the cool thing, we can link these applications in chat.
Yeah,
which
that's
is sweet.
One thing I'm not thrilled about, ironically.
Maybe they should limit it so it can only be PM only. That would actually, I guess you're right. Maybe people would be spamming PMs, huh?
Yeah, I haven't been there in ESO. I've been there in other games where it's like you say anything in zone and then it's like, oh, hey, then you get this PM from somebody that's like, join my guild.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I like it because, if someone is like, can I have a guild app or something, you can easily throw them one, and it's pretty neat. Again, though, I don't really care what size the guild is. I think, again, like I said, I want this to work for the UI team, especially for my own selfish gain. I really want this to work. But I think what we've got is an actual spam tool that was just created. And I don't mean just the ability to link it, but the fact that there's no quality check on who's applying for your guild. You can't ask them any questions in the application. And since it's just a flat apply, even the applicants feel like spam to the guild side of things. They're just, what's your interest? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the one place this is going to work out the way it's written right now, the two groups that are going to benefit are your trials groups, like your trials guilds, progression guilds that want to filter through a bunch of people. Like they'll run their weeklies, and then it's like if you didn't make the cut, you're out. And then the other group are going to be trade guilds, where it's like you need 500 bodies at all times.
Yeah.
And so without having looked at it, I'm assuming that you're in your descriptions for yourself, you can set dues or sales quotas. So you'd be able to say, okay, you've joined the guild. These are the sales quotas or the dues. Get out there and make money.
Yeah.
And at that point, being able to just automate the process and not have to designate out officers to recruit people, that's actually convenient. No, I understand where you're coming from, though. And at the same time, I'm also looking at it. You're right. This is not going to help with guild spam. Because the guild invites are just like the guild spam in Zone is just going to now also have a link. So it's like, hey, do you want to join? Here, just click this link instead of, PM this person or PM me. Like, is that really? I guess that's an improvement, but
maybe I should put this out. I was going to say maybe I shouldn't put this out there in the world, but maybe I am. Maybe I should be the person to say this. This is definitely going to increase your amount of trolls joining your guild. Heads up, everybody. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if you can just list your guild and you can't give them hurdles, which is I really do believe that the hurdles are a lot of the reason why people in the description of these shows below, you can find a link to our guild application page. Even if you don't want to join the guild, you can go through and you can play with the application. If you don't want to join the guild, don't submit it for finally, because you're going to get an invite anyway. Like we'll check your application if you bothered to fill it out, right? But in it, you can see in that application, we ask a lot of questions that are meant to really make people kind of spend some time on that app. And I have turned people away that wrote like, I asked them, why do you want to join? And someone wrote like, they were a real person, not a troll. And they wrote like, because you're fun or something. Like it was like, so it was, it wasn't even that. It was something so short that I was like, I'm sorry, you really need to go back and rewrite that. I have to decline this app at the moment, because I was trying at the time. I didn't know that they weren't a troll. So like we use that kind of, it's the effort barrier is kind of what it is. And right now there's no effort barrier. And that's going to be a problem for all guilds that choose to use this system and blindly accept, because you don't have any quality checks. So all I'm saying is it is a fantastic foundational bedrock. But if it's going to be a feature that lives past 6 months from now, I think it needs some yes and no reporting, at least. Yeah. If not, just, using the same system as the mail system, let people write in some blanks there. I mean, I know that's something that the UI team actually doesn't really have already existing in the game very much. There's really not a lot of like text boxes for us. So I don't know. I think Bobby's team did a fantastic job on what they've got so far, but I think it definitely also has a couple extra miles to go before it becomes useful, because I'm thinking of it right now as a thing where we're going to send people to a website to apply. And then if they get accepted, we're going to say, find this thing in game and then apply again. Because back to the other problem that we still can't send guild invites out.
Yeah. And this can't be attached to a mail.
No, I don't think it should be mail, but I think that they already have a kind of a system that works there. But even the mail system doesn't work in game. I mean, it always tells me it can't send the mail, and it really did. So there's a lot of server side things that do need fixed. So I don't know. Like I said, I think this is in a good position, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
To leave on a final positive note, though, there are 3 houses, but now maybe only 2 that you could see on the PTS. We were able to preview 3 homes, but at least now you can visit the Sugar Bowl Inn, which is the apartment, and then you can visit the other house that's escaping me name-wise in Rimmon.
Lunar Champion.
Which one?
The Lunar Champion.
Lunar Champion.
It's like
That's it.
Oh, wait, now I can't remember. It's like Shrine of Lunar Champion or something like that. It's really, really snazzy.
And that's the one that expands in all the different corridors. So it is, it's going to be an interesting, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting house for people. And I think it could potentially change the game for housing in the future. The idea of unlocking different rooms to your home due to questing and such. I mean, that's
and that first room that unlocks, like because it is this sort of small room. It's a dark room, and then you get four stones total. Like you get two right now. The other two are going to be tied to the next two DLCs. And each time you plant down one of these stones, you open up one of the rooms after the first one. The first one goes down and it just lights up the various tablets. And then when you put down one on the various like where the stones rest, where the tablets rest on the stones, these little plinths, then that'll open a portal and you can go through it. The first portal we've seen is actually the dock from the prologue quest when you first go into the Halls of Colossus. So you can look down at the dock and you can build up here, and then you can gradually build a ramp down and fall off and be eaten by slaughterfish. It's great.
We did. We may have done this.
We did. We may have conspired to kill one another repeatedly.
Yeah, it happened a little bit.
But yeah, and so that's actually a really neat setup. I'd still love to see this where it's like you can actually remove walls and have actual rooms that you just walk into as opposed to you have to pass through a portal. But for this system, for what they're doing here, this is really cool.
Agreed. I am very much a fan of it. I'm really excited to see what it plays out with at the end of this year. And from what I've seen of it already, I would highly encourage to keep working with this sort of feature. In fact, and I know this is a huge ask for the future, like this is a totally massive ask. But again, if the lifespan of this game is another 5 years, I think we need this sort of progress. I would ask the housing team work with the server team on the idea of possibly customizable other wings to your homes, which is again something we've already seen in the Elder Scrolls universe in the single player games, but specifically Skyrim's Hearthfire. But I think that would add a lot of customization to housing, and I know it's a big ask, but again, if it's something that's coming in the future, the other ask I see floating around by someone in Twitch chat the other day was farming. People were asking for that to come to houses. So I really do think that this sort of base style thing, having a home base is an interesting facet. And next week, go ahead.
One of the fun ones, like this is going back a little bit further because Hearthfire would let you build a house and let you expand the house out. Morrowind would let you have entire strongholds. So you'd have your house, you'd have like guard posts, you'd have a wall go up, you'd have an outhouse. If you've seen the houses on Vardenfell where it's like you've got a central house and you've got a little house off to the side and all that, that's kind of what was going on.
Got it.
The one thing you couldn't do with that, they didn't do with that, was everything in Morrowind externally was part of the same cell set. So it wasn't like you passed through a door and loaded inside like the way the houses work now. And I suspect it would be a lot harder on the team overall if you tried to have a thing where it's like it starts as a house and then gets a wall. Yeah. But it's still a really cool thing.
That actually is true, meaning like what's the exterior look like, you're saying? You're right. You know what? I think if you're going to do something with weird towers and stuff like that, you probably would have to really obscure the outside of the home. And I'm not necessarily saying this, but the first thing comes to my mind is you'd have to put it behind like a mountain almost and be like, well, you go through this tunnel into your house and then you could freely build on the other side. But I get what your point is. I was even thinking a little bit smaller, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose the other option on that front would require a serious tech change. Just on the way it's presented to you, because there's already some support in phasing for letting two players see completely different things when they look at it. Right. So it's like for one player, you walk up, you see the wall, it's an empty lot. But for another player, you walk up, you can see your whole manor building out from that. That would be pretty cool, but I really suspect the engine doesn't support that right now.
And I have to walk a line here and say, I did put forward the idea to the housing team of using different stamps for homes. And what I mean by that is, for those that know the Alinor Crest townhouse in Alinor, that house shares the exact same structure as about 4 or so of its neighboring homes. But you'll notice that let's look at the base floor alone, some of them have different room structures. So in the Alinor one we can buy, you walk in, the first 2 rooms on your left actually have a wall in between. They make them feel a little claustrophobic. Other people's houses have an open way there, or some of them have a staircase that goes higher up or something like that. And I proposed to the team, I said, is there any way we could either buy different variants of the house or, swap to different stamps? So I did put that bug in the ear. I think that would be very cool, especially since the assets are already generated. We're not asking for extra manpower. The manpower currently has been done, except for the server side manpower. That would need to be a feature that has to be built in there somehow, and a little bit of UI. So
Yeah, I haven't studied Alinor specifically in this subject because, like, I have in other zones. When you look at stuff like the Daggerfall Overlook, like that stamp is used repeatedly throughout the game as Breton castles. And when you go to some place like Evermore and you go downstairs, there's actually a wall. You know, because in the default Daggerfall stamp, the whole thing is open. You can walk in, and there's these two pillars that are sort of supporting columns. In the Evermore basement, there's actually a wall between one of those columns and one of the walls. So it splits off this little separate room down there. If you look closely, you can realize it's actually still the same stamp. They've just applied a wall there to fit across that. So at a very simple level, it might be possible to simply green light snappable locations to apply walls.
Interesting.
It would just be like, it'd just be another object. It would just be locked in position based on you're snapping it here. And close off an area or open up another area by adjusting walls. So like that's without actually digging through, because I've never looked at this on the back end, without digging through how they're actually doing it, I suspect a lot of those stamps are just being tweaked by dropping an item here or dropping an item there. And that might be including cases like the Alinor townhouses where it's like, it looks like there's a wall there, but really it's just the wall has been replaced. Like the wall is a removable object and a different wall has been dropped in.
That's possible for some of it.
Yeah, if that's possible, that would be a really slick way to solve that problem.
I think that's a very good point. That would actually open up an entire different world of, like, if we could actually customize. Now, that could be a physics nightmare, you know, to be determined how that would actually work. But within limitations, like even if there were reasonable limitations put on the wall features for the game, that could still be amazingly fun to customize a house, because the walls we have are extraordinarily subjective. I mean, you're lucky if you can find a wall coloring that matches the house that you're in. And even if you match the color, which is probably the most eyesore if it doesn't match, then your next thing is, does the embroidery work? Like a lot of them have fine stonework in it. Embroidery is the wrong word, but you know, the etchings are different. And so, you know, it's a questionable thing, but I mean, if it could be done, I'd love it. Now, the Alinor ones, I think some of them are complete different stamps in the sense that they have staircases that are different.
Yeah.
And that changes, you know, some of the floors aren't where they should be, but they're still the same size. So, I mean, you could be in that work.
In that case, I kind of wonder if it's actually a tile set. And again, I haven't tinkered around with this, the tools for this, obviously, because again, nobody outside of ZOS has, but I kind of suspect that in some of these cases, like we talk about stamps, right? And to a certain extent, we're talking about stamps, talking about brushes. These are terms that come out of graphic design where it's like you'll have a preset design that you can just plop down. And this is even the term used in 3D spaces when you're creating a map for a house or other interior space. So we're saying stamps with sort of this, it's a pre-designed house that they can just plop down and use with minor modifications. I wonder if on the back end, the Alinor houses were actually designed using a slotting tile set, because we know from concept art that came out that a lot of this stuff was designed with different pieces just sort of by themselves. So if there is an option for like a full tile set for this, that would be really awesome to get our hands on it for housing. But that would also be kind of a physics nightmare, or at least a rendering nightmare, just because if you turn players loose with that much control, you'll do things like what everybody in Fallout 4 does the instant they realize there's a console command to change your settlement budgets. So it can get kind of crazy.
Can get crazy.
You will crush anything you try to do on a console with that. So, yeah. It would be really cool if we could do that, but that one's a big ask. As opposed to being able to say, okay, let's just slot different pieces here and there.
Yeah.
And the other option here is to have completely different house sets that attach at the same exterior location.
That'd be cool.
Because again, we already exist with this sort of in the game as it is, because my Daggerfall Overlook and your Daggerfall Overlook are completely distinct spaces and look nothing alike.
Right.
But they're both socketed to the same door. And if we take a step back from that and say, okay, well, when you buy this house, you need to pick from this list of potential layouts, and you only get to pick once, but you get to pick one of these, and then you're permanently locked to that. That would still be a pretty cool option, just to give yourself some more room to get creative with the layout.
Can I make a disgusting money suggestion to you guys at Cinemax? If you let us pick between 4 different housing styles and let us have multiples of the housing styles, some people would buy 2 or 3.
Ninja Monkey?
Definitely Ninja Monkey, possibly Kyle Dempster Studios, possibly Coco Michelle. I don't know. I can't speak for these people, not even me. But, they might. I'm just saying the likelihood, it could happen. So, I don't know. Do you want to go on a fancy vacation this year, ZeniMax team? Add more houses. Want a bigger holiday bonus? Give me more houses.
Add more houses? Yeah, okay.
It kind of works, though. So, I'm just saying.
Bankroll it personally.
I probably will. Have fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it could be a very fun thing. And let's save that for some of this for next week's episode because I think it ties in. We would have talked to you guys next week about the idea of preventing burnout in ESO. Because we are in that awkward period right now. We've all known this is coming, but this is the hardest time right now where we are we're actually under a month now. It's, April 24th today. So May 20th, the Necromancer hits, and I am feeling not any serious case of burnout because I know on the horizon, my interest level is ready to spike. But I'm also saying, I've been on the PTS, I've played my Necromancer. He plays really fucking well. I'd love to play him all the time. But I don't have him on live, and therefore I don't really have anything to progress forward to. I can run more things with my Templar, but I know he's going to just become a mule in less than a month. So what do I do right now? And we want to kind of talk to you guys about that, and maybe setting so we can also theory craft some community goals for people to work on, because I know I've had a couple people come to me saying, what can I work on to help the guild? And I say, that's a great question. So next week we can come back together and talk about that sort of stuff. If you guys have any ideas in the interim for community events, I think that'd be great, especially if you want to email any of those over. The email is kyledempsterstudios@gmail.com. We can read them off on the show. I'd be curious to see if you guys have any that you really enjoy. If there's any that you are curious how that might work out, we could just talk about. That'd be fun. If you have any tactics you employ, I know I've been cutting my streams in half. We've been doing half ESO at the start and then moving over to play 7 Days to Die in the later portions. We're going to try and focus a bit more on ESO here soon again, but just trying to give our whole community a little bit of a break to relax and enjoy. So, Stark, we did a big recap of all this stuff. Any last words on anything for this week?
No, nothing for this week.
Okay. Well, you guys know where to find us. I'm over at twitch.tv/Kyle Dempster Studios. The streams start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Stark's been popping over there a good bit. I am over on Twitter at twitter.com/Kyle Dempster STU. Stark, you're twitter.com/.
I'm actually, on Twitter, Michael J. Schwartz. Sorry, for some reason I thought you said Twitch. Wow.
It's likely I did. I do it all the time, but I think that time I had it right.
You did say Twitter. Yeah, you did.
Ha! I win. 1 point.
You got me.
That's the goal every week, just to see if I can get Stark in the outro.
Sleep deprivation helps enormously.
It really does, doesn't it? The email again, kyledempsterstudios@gmail.com. I urge you guys to check out the website. kyledempsterstudios.com is changed since you've probably gone there last. So that's up there. It's got a lot of helpful links. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want a buyer's guide to pick up ESO that helps out the stream and dogs, there's a link for that, as well as like a general social links page, which has all kinds of things, including my socials, but also things like databases for ESO, furnishings, many things like that. Like you can just click them right from there. So hopefully you guys find that useful. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Stark. Or no, it's now Wednesday that we're recording, but these guys are listening to it on Sunday. I was splitting my words mid-sentence. So until next week, everyone, bye-bye.
Take care.